Investor, educator, and author Robert Kiyosaki has changed millions of lives all over the world. His book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, has been on the New York Times bestseller list for over 5 years. We all know that the gap between the haves and the have-nots is growing, and Social Security and Medicare are in a financial mess. And just affording to live is getting expensive. So how does a person get ahead financially? The answer is raising your financial IQ and having your money work for you. Here's Robert Kiyosaki with Rich Dad's Teach to Be Rich.
What I'd like to go into really quickly for a while is the E, S, the B, and the I. And as you may notice, that one of the ways I am successful is because I did very poorly in school. And because I did poorly in school was I learned to cooperate and hang around, like I said, smart people. So one of the reasons I am successful is I'm smart enough to not hang around with what I call losers. I don't mean to be disrespectful, but my time is very important to me. How many people in this room hang out with people that actually bring you down? Good. You know, that you may love them, and nothing saying is right or wrong with that, but I need to get on with my life and my work. So that's why I've been very careful who I spend my time with. So before we bring Sharon up here, and we're going to talk about this quadrant really quickly. Are you ready? Let's have a hand for Sharon, please. Now, Sharon is a CPA, not only ASIC, but the CPA. Would you mind telling them the difference between E's, S's, B's, and I tax-wise? The 43 Tax Act and the 86 Tax Reform Act.
Absolutely. How many of you would like to pay fewer taxes? Okay, then you have to move to the right side of the quadrant. In 1943, employees lost half their paycheck before they saw it. It was the Withholding Act. So all of you who have been employees or are employees know that little word called net pay. You think you're making one thing, but you're actually making your net pay because the government takes its share before you get yours. So you're not really able to spend what you earn. You earn it, you get taxed, and then hopefully you can live on what you get what's left.
You know, the 43 Act was called the Current Tax Payment Act, and basically it meant the government gets paid first. But as a CPA, can you do anything for an E?
There's absolutely no tax planning that an employee can do that will help you get to the right side of the quadrant.
And the reason I wanted Sharon to start first is because taxes are our single largest expense. Like I say, in 2005, I will spend more, pay more out in taxes than most people will earn in their lifetime. So I'm not against paying taxes. I just want to pay as little as possible. Right?
Right. And then there was the Tax Reform Act of 1986. And it was something that eliminated what few tax benefits were still left for highly paid professionals, doctors, lawyers, architects, accountants. It took it away.
The A students, you know, justifiably so, got theirs taken away, you know. And the C students are intact here.
However, this is now my line, the A students, the E's and the S's, if they are smart, will start working on the right side of the quadrant, starting a part-time business, buying that piece of real estate, because that's how you build wealth. On the left side of this quadrant is you working for money. So the only option is another job or more clients, and the more successful you become, the less time you have. On the right side, the people on the right side, the business owners, the investors, they wrote the tax laws. So the tax laws were written for the rich, and therefore they benefit the rich. So what you want to do is to start acting like a rich person and doing what the rich do. And that's what this program is all about.
So can I add one more thing? And please listen to this, because it's one of the hardest things for people to understand. When I say work for free, these people go psychotic because they have, I must do something to get paid. They will not work for free. Over here, people work for free because they're not working for the same kind of income. It is one of the toughest things to understand. I'd rather work, most of my friends will work for free simply because they'd rather have a different kind of income here. These people are entrepreneurs, and these people here are worker bees. And they have a different mindset when it comes to that paycheck. And if you can let go of the idea of needing that paycheck, which I don't expect too many people to understand yet, because so many people are so needy for that money that they cannot move here. It's really this horrible feeling inside. So if you can work for free over here, you'll actually get richer and pay less taxes. It's really an irony of the whole thing.
And earlier, Robert said, the left side, these people are working for income, the paycheck. Okay, on the right, people are working to build assets that generate income,
right,
where their money is working for them. And that's the biggest difference, and that's the way to wealth. And you can be operating in two different quadrants, but you must start operating on the right side of the quadrant.
This is where the tax breaks are. I can pay zero taxes. And like I said earlier, the problem with the 401k, when you put a 401k as a passive investor, you're still taxed like an employee. I mean, why would you want to do that? It makes no sense to me. But they don't tell you that in school. They say 401k is a good idea. As a rich person, 401k actually makes no sense. It's too risky. My banker won't lend me money. I can't get insurance on it. And in fact, the government taxes me on it. It's ridiculous. It is one of the most ridiculous plans I've ever seen, personally. If you're going to be rich. If you want to be poor, 401k is great. Knock yourself out. Have a good time, you know.
When you pull out that income, you pay the highest tax rate. It makes no sense.
It makes no sense. Okay? So thank you, Sharon. I appreciate
Thank you.
it. Give her a hand. Thank you. I want to bring Michael Lecter up, her husband. And Michael Lecter, may or may not know this, he is one of the most influential and successful and most famous patent attorneys or intellectual property attorneys in America.
Well, thank you, sir.
And I'd like to show you why I hired Michael years and years ago. Was this here, back in the 70s, was my first multi-million-dollar project. What it is a little shoe pocket. I designed it in the 70s. They went on the running shoes like this, and you put inside here a key, some money, and it also came with an ID card in case you drop dead. They could identify the body. Because jogging had just started, and I designed this product like this, and it went on the shoe, and this was the first prototype of it. This is a prototype. We sat there with a little sewing machine, we chopped it up and all this, and then this is a production model here. But the reason I went to see Michael first this time when I designed the cash flow game is very simply because back then when I designed this game, this product in the 70s, I didn't have the $7,000 to hire a patent attorney. So I figured since I was good at marketing, I could outgun the market. And so I came out to market with this product. I made Playboy magazine, Gentleman's Quarterly, Runner's World magazine. My two partners and I were in our 20s. We became multi-millionaires, went straight to the top. There was only one problem, is we didn't protect it. And soon after we came out with this, my nylon and Velcro surfer wallets took off also. The whole business exploded on us. And because we were successful, the crooks came in, or the copycats came in. Well, it's not their fault, it's my fault, because I didn't see Michael at first. Does that make sense, you guys here? For $7,000, I could still be a millionaire. But we went straight up, and we went straight down trying to save $1 million. So this time, when I designed the cash flow board game, I walked into Michael's office with this, and he's the first person I see. And this here is the early prototype of this game here, what you see here. And this is what I walked in to see Michael about, and his reputation went way ahead of him, and I decided to hire the very best I could find. And that's Michael Lecter.
Thank you. Well, we've got to put this into perspective.
Okay.
Now, Robert walks into my office, and I've got I'm semi-retired at this point, but I had the big corner office with the big desk and the walnut on the wall, and in comes Robert, and he was wearing a Hawaiian shirt, shorts, and he says something like,
retired.
and we hit it off right away. And he says something really lofty, like, I'm on a mission. I'm going to raise the financial well-being of mankind. And I'm looking at this guy, and he cleans up pretty well. But I mean, you should have seen him. And I'm going, okay, well, I hear you. So what do we got? And he pulls out this roll of paper, and he spreads it out on my desk. And it was the prototype for the cash flow game. And you know what? Mission accomplished. He has actually raised financial well-being of mankind.
Because this game's now in how many different languages?
Oh, Lord. I've lost track. 30 or 40 languages, is that right?
15 game, 44 books.
15 games, the books are in 44 different languages. Anyway. Now,
And just to let you know how far it went is my books, the Chinese Communist government recommends 20 U.S. books. We have 2 out of the 20 they recommend. So that's how much it's changed.
and the books are referred to as the Purple Storm.
Excuse me.
You see a book in black and purple, what's the first thing you think? Rich Dad. And that didn't happen by accident.
That was all by design. You know.
That's called a trademark, and you're building your reputation. Again, you're building intellectual property assets.
This is the point, is that, Michael, your book here is this, is protecting a number one asset. And when people says it takes money to make money, that's not really quite true, because your greatest asset are your ideas. And so I took the word Rich Dad and we made it a brand, a trademark. How much would you say Rich Dad's worth today?
Oh, wow. In the hundreds of millions of dollars.
That's how much the name is worth, because Michael protected it all over the world.
And what did it mean 10 years ago?
Nothing.
You had a wealthy father.
Yeah. So when somebody says it takes money to make money, they really don't know what they're talking about. But you have to operate like a B, not an E or an S here.
You build an asset and then you leverage that asset. If your contribution to a business is a piece of intellectual property, some intangible asset that may have cost you very little cash out of hand, your return on investment can be infinite.
It's like the name Coca-Cola. The plant and equipment is worth about $8 billion. The word Coca-Cola is worth about $80 billion. How much do you think Google is worth as a name today? It's in
Harley
billions.
Davidson.
Harley Davidson. They're worth billions. Apple, billions. So those are some of the differences between rich people and poor people. As Sharon said, these guys are working hard and these guys are thinking hard. There's a difference.
So you build the asset, you protect it, you establish an exclusive right to it, and then you can leverage it into a business.
Or you can do what I did and make somebody else very rich. And we're very smart, but we lost it all to save $7,000.
You got to remember, the marketplace is not like a sprint. It's not a race. You can't run faster than the competition. I mean, it's more like a relay race, except the competition can come and grab the baton out of your hand.
So, thank you. The next person I want to bring up, you can stay up here, is Blair Singer, because Blair does a lot of work with these two products. Like I said, the first thing my rich dad said to me when I was going to become a B in 1974 was I had to learn how to sell, and secondly is how to build a team, right? These are Blair's 2 books.
Absolutely. And how many people in this room have ever had at least what you would consider to be at least one, like Michael says, at least one good idea? How many people have ever had more than one? But how many people have ever met somebody that had a good idea, didn't make any money with it? How many know somebody like that intimately well? And see, and one of the things, and when we did the advisor series, one of the first advisor books was Sales Dogs, because the #1 skill in business is you got to be able to sell. How many people here have ever tried to get your point of view across to somebody else and they totally didn't get it? How many people realize it was their problem? You see, and so one of the things that keeps people from moving from the left to the right side as a business owner is 3 primary skills. #1, you got to be able to sell. All the great ideas, all the great products in the world do no good unless you can communicate it to somebody else and get them to take action on that. How many people would like to be able to know how to do that? How many would like to just be able to do it at home? You see, and so it's more, the reason I say that is it's not just, formally as a business skill, it's a life skill. The thing that I work with businesses all over the world we've known each other for what, 20 years? Work with businesses all over the place. And what pains me is entrepreneurs, people really want to go out and make something happen, but they can't get anybody to come to them with any kind of cash to exchange for the idea or the service.
They can't sell.
They can't sell it. They can't sell it. And so that's number one. Number two is, along with sales, in order to be, the difference over here, these guys work mostly on their own. I know this intimately well, okay? But the idea is if you're going to build a business, you got to build a championship team. And the reason sales is number one, because it's not just about selling product to somebody else, it's also about selling why somebody would want to be on your team. Because if you can't communicate that, why would anybody want to play on your team? So that's what we do, is we work, the reason for those two books, the ABCs, you got them over there?
Right here.
Yeah. Sales Dogs, which basically says that you don't have to be an attack dog to be successful in sales. Everybody can sell. It's not rocket science, although when I ask, how many people here, by show of hands, how many people here genuinely like to sell? Show of hands. Okay, good. How many people, when I say the word sales, you get a knot in your stomach? See, that's when you ask the average American, average person, sell something or drink a bottle of Clorox, and half of them would go for the Clorox. But the truth of it is, has anybody here ever met a 5-year-old that couldn't sell? If you haven't had that experience, I'll loan you my 3-year-old and 10-year-old. But the truth is, it's a critical skill. If you want to build wealth, if you want to build a business, got to be able to sell and be able to attract a great team, set a code of honor, a set of rules in place so that you make sure that everybody's on the same agenda. How many people have ever been part of a group where everybody had their own agenda? You see, and one of the things that's held Rich Dad together all these years is that Robert, Sharon, Kim, myself, all the advisors have a very strict code, set of rules, what it takes to be on the team.
So I'll give a plug to an organization that's called the Network Marketing Industry. Some people call it multi-level and all this. And I wrote a book to support them. I'm not in the business. I don't make my money that way. But it's called The Business School for People Who Want to Help People. And the main reason I recommend network marketing is I had the benefit of going to the Xerox Corporation to learn how to sell, professional sales training. Most people don't have that ability. So a network marketing company, they're training you to be a business owner. And the number one skill they train you in is how to sell, how to communicate. They don't like to say that because most people have this negative attitude towards it, but it's a great training ground. The problem with getting a job with Xerox is if you can't sell, they fire you. And one of the things about network marketing companies, if you can't sell, at least they'll work with you. But you have to put in your 2 bits here. So that's why I wrote this book, The Business School, and support an industry that's actually teaching the same skills my rich dad said were important to me with business skills. So if you're going to move from E to S to B and I think you have to learn how to sell. And I'm a very shy person, but I actually learned how to do that. So thank you, Blair. The last 2 people I want to bring up, I'm bringing up Sharon and Garrett really quickly because they do this little shtick for me, which is important. And the reason I want them up here is this, is the big mistake that people make is they take legal advice from accountants and then they take accounting advice from attorneys. So. Would you talk about that?
Well, Garrett got a head start earlier because he was up here without me, and I was itching to come up and protect the accounting profession. It is absolutely essential that you get the right advice from the right advisor. It sounds simple, but there are accountants that do tell you to do everything on your Schedule C. Find a new accountant. I couldn't agree more. They are not helping you protect your family's future.
If they say to you, become a sole proprietorship or a partnership, find a new person. They're giving you bad asset protection advice, right?
That's absolutely correct. But your accountant and your tax advisors are essential to allow you to build your business in the right direction from a tax perspective. Attorneys should not be telling you how to do your taxes. You have to use the right advisor for the right advice and find a good advisor who will give you good advice. Both very important skills. You don't want me doing your legal work, guaranteed. These days you probably don't want me doing your tax work either. It's been a while since I did a tax return. But you must get competent tax advice. It helps you grow your business quicker. Many of you in this room right now are paying too much in taxes because you're not getting competent tax advice. I did, even and I knew this stuff. Got excellent tax advice, and we were able to structure ourselves in a better format to save income tax because there are only a few people that can stay current on everything. Exactly the same way. Garrett came to us and said, you need to change where you're doing your incorporations. Wyoming is now the place you need to be going. I'm not going to argue with him. He's the expert. Thank you, Garrett, because it protects us. And when I have somebody come up at events and talk to me and ask me legal questions, I send them to Garrett. And when Garrett has somebody come up and ask tax questions, I think he sends them to me. Your turn.
You're absolutely right, Sharon. You don't want me doing your tax return. Please, I am not a tax attorney. I don't do taxes, but I do work really well with CPAs and people who understand the tax system. And that's what you want to do. That's one of Robert's messages. It's a team sport. Business and investing are a team sport, and two of the key members of your team are going to be your attorney and your CPA. And what I do in my practice is frequently I will get on the phone with the client, the CPA, and myself, and we'll have everybody there on the same phone call. We don't need to be in the same room. In some cases, we're talking on a conference call with people spread around the country. But you need to have those three people on the phone at the same time. What happens so often, and Sharon, you've seen this, is an attorney will say, that's a tax question, go talk to your CPA. And the CPA will say, well, that's a legal question, go talk to your attorney. And you play this phone tag game and nothing ever gets done. So by having everybody on the phone at the same time, in as little as half an hour, you can make decisions and move forward to protect your assets and to save on taxes. It's a great way to go.
So if I could, in conclusion, I would say, if you're an E or an S, all you need is financial planners, and that's about it. And exactly as Scott McPherson says, they're going to sell you stocks, bonds, savings, mutual funds, and get out of debt, because that's all they can sell you. Over here, these are my advisors. I don't have a financial planner per se. What I am is a B and an I, and I play the game a little bit differently. So if you're going to be successful, I strongly suggest knowing the differences there. Because every time I meet a financial planner, they always tell me the same thing. Work hard, save money, get out of debt, invest for long term, and diversify, and naturally buy stocks, bonds, mutual funds, and things like that, because that's what they sell. And if you're going to be an active investor, you need a different team than people who are passive investors. Is that true?
Absolutely. And if I could just add one little piece of just incredibly good path to follow, is you want to find somebody who is an advisor who has already done for another client what you have done. You don't want to have them learning on your dime. As we have grown more successful, we've had to change certain advisors because we needed advisors who had already been there and had clients bigger than us. You don't want to be that advisor's largest client, because what you're doing is you're paying them to research, not paying them for their knowledge and experience. And it's very important that you make sure your advisors have the expertise in the area that you want to build your business or your personal life.
As I got wealthier, I had to change my advisors and things like this, so I pay more, but their advice is more important. If you're poor, any advice will do. Okay. So that's the big difference here. So let's have a big hand for our advisors. I'm going to go into right now what I think is a very important subject for any investor, and that is one of the ways I make a lot of money is watching this right here. It's a thing called trends. And as I said, I didn't do well in school most of the time because I was bored, but there was two subjects I really enjoyed in school. One of them was history, which is trending, and second was wood shop. And when most of my classmates were building salad bowls for Mom, I built an 8-foot El Toro sailboat, and that's how I got an A for that. But I'm going to be talking to you today about what I consider one of the biggest trends and why America, and not only America, but many of the world right now, we have this massive problem between poor and poverty and this growing gap between the haves and have-nots. But I'd like to show you the shift in the world today from socialism to capitalism. So let's go back in time. In 1929, the stock market crashed. This affected my mom and dad because it led to the Depression. So how many people know people who grew up during the Depression? How many people know them because they wanted job security and pensions? Really, really a lot. And that's really affected their thinking. So then 1929, after that, led to 1933, and it led to the New Deal, FDR, Franklin Delano Roosevelt. And he came out with the New Deal in Social Security. Interestingly enough, in 1933, Hitler came to power also. Now, this is why it's so important. As I said right now, savers are losing their savings. The reason this is so important is because Hitler came to power because the middle class had their savings wiped out. And the same thing is happening right now, is that if 401ks and pensions don't work and savings don't work, it may bring rise to another type of political party. So in 1933, two guys were elected, FDR, Hitler. And the other thing that's interesting is on the cash flow game, as I said, in 1933, this is what they formed here, was called I call the fast track. And in 1933, a man named Joseph Kennedy, father of John Kennedy, created this here, investments only for the rich here, because they wanted to separate the poor and middle class from getting into the better investments or the riskier investments. So that's why 1933 is a very important year. The next year is 1943, as we said, the Current Tax Payment Act. Because we were in World War II at the time, and the federal government needed so much money, they said, let's pick on the employees. And that's why today, employees, every time you pick up your paycheck, it's go, ah! How many people have ever done that? What happened to my money? You know? So the 43 Tax Act was the one that nailed the employees right here. It's Current Tax Payment Act. Then we go to 1964, and LBJ created what was called the Great Society. But it also gave rise to Medicare, which is the biggest problem we have today, and I'll show you the numbers on Medicare. And it's socialism at its best, because going back to 1929, the World War II generation really wanted government to protect people. And I think it's a great idea if we can afford it. But today we cannot afford that, and that's the problem. So the problems today that not so much my generation, the baby boom generation is not going to face it, is those of you born after 1964 are the ones that are going to be paying for the actions taken in 1929, 1933, 43, and 64. So your youngsters are going to pay for my golf fees, and I really appreciate that a lot. So anyway, then we go to 1971, and as I said, that was the year that Nixon took us off the gold standard. The gold standard at that time was known as the Bretton Woods Agreement, which was formed in 1944. That change has caused every saver to be a loser right now. It's because the federal government can print money. It's not really money, it's now a currency. We don't save money, we save currency anymore. And that's why the savers are going to lose. You notice the same thing happened that brought Hitler to power. The very same thing that happened in 71 is what caused the Weimar government to print money so fast. So history may not repeat, but it sounds alike. It's very similar. So we were heading for the same direction. Next date is this. 74 was ERISA, which led to the 401k in the 1980s. The reason that's so important is because it was the first time big businesses were no longer going to take care of our employees. It was a shift from the defined benefit pension plans that the General Motors and United Airlines have, which are today bankrupt anyway, to the defined contribution pension plans. The reason that's so important is it was a shift away from socialism and into capitalism. That's why 1974, at least to me, is such an important year. It was also the year I came back from Vietnam. Next year was this. 1980 was Reagan and Thatcher, and governments came into view. They were more capitalistic. So the battle between socialism and capitalism was raging on. If you remember that Reagan was the guy that crushed, the air traffic controller strike and kicked the unions out and all this. So basically the workers over here by this time were really having a hard time because the government was now capitalist and not socialist. So the benefits they once enjoyed were now being taken away. Next is this. 86 Tax Reform Act. As Sharon said, it was the doctors, lawyers, and accountants. These guys then got nailed. They got the worst tax breaks possible. So a guy like me doesn't have the same tax things that these guys have. So again, the shift away from socialism to capitalism is taking place, and they're picking on this side of the quadrant. Next date. 1989 was the Berlin Wall came down. The reason that's so significant was 89 was the Berlin Wall came down. It shifted away, said that communist Europe, which is Russia, Hungary, and those countries, were now shifting to capitalism. So even the socialists communists were becoming capitalists. Another thing about 1989 was that's the year the World Wide Web came up and technology took over. So the changes were so fast, but our school systems still say to the kids, go to school and get a safe, secure job with pensions and benefits and all that. The reason school teachers can say that is because they're government employees. And it's fine. The trouble is our governments are technically bankrupt right now. They cannot afford it. Next date is this, was the 1996 Telecom Reform Act. The reason 1996 is so important is Telecom Reform Act gave rise to a company like Global Crossing, and they were able to spread fiber optic cable all over the world. What that meant was it is now cheaper for me to hire an accountant in either India or the Philippines. I can hire a doctor, a computer programmer in the Philippines or Ireland or Russia. The Telecom Reform Act made it cheaper for me to call overseas than it did to call next door. So that's why that was so important. And then in 2001, China joins the WTO. And the reason that's so important was the biggest communist country in the world became capitalist. And meanwhile, our school systems are still telling you to go to school, get a safe, secure job, look for a pay raise, get pension benefits and all that. That is such an obsolete idea because it is a shift now from socialism to capitalism, and now we're competing against some of the biggest, most powerful countries in the world. If you think you can get a pay raise and work harder to get yourself out of this situation, some can, but most people will not, very simply because after this whole shift came about, governments can no longer protect you. Socialism, as we know it, is kaput. And I think it's about time our school systems start coming up to speed and stop protecting people, with the idea of pensions and those benefits, because those ideas are gone. And that's why I cover in the whole thing the shift from socialism to capitalism and watching the historical changes. So what that means is your children will probably not be able to get those high-paying jobs and all this, or is able to sit there and collect more benefits or go on strike, which all those union guys do and all this. You better start producing, or as Bob Dylan says, you better start swimming or you'll sink like a stone. So that's why those dates are so important. It is a shift from socialism to capitalism. My mom and dad, bless their hearts, were very kind people. I would say they're socialists. That's why they believe the government and companies should take care of people. That is an obsolete idea. Today, in ultra-competitive capitalism, you'd better produce or you're out. Because if you want a higher paying job, I'll just hire somebody away from you in India or something like that. Does that make sense, you guys here? And that's why I would say the school system is so obsolete, and they better start teaching people financial education as soon as possible. Thank you.
Investor, educator, and author Robert Kiyosaki has changed millions of lives all over the world. His book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, has been on the New York Times bestseller list for over 5 years. We all know that the gap between the haves and the have-nots is growing, and Social Security and Medicare are in a financial mess. And just affording to live is getting expensive. So how does a person get ahead financially? The answer is raising your financial IQ and having your money work for you. Here's Robert Kiyosaki with Rich Dad's Teach to Be Rich.
So welcome back, and we're going into what I think is a more interesting subject. It's a subject called the game of money. And the way I got this from is from my rich dad. He said that life is much like a football game or a basketball game. It's in 4 quarters. So I know some of you may not like sports, but just bear with me here. So what the game of money looks like is to go up here. First of all, there's a pregame show. So when you watch a football game, the rah-rah and the cheerleaders and all that stuff, and you have the commentators talking about, well, I think the Orioles are going to win, or this is going to win, and all this stuff. Then you get into the first quarter, and that's ages 25 to 35. Now, the reason I call it 4 quarters is because generally our working lifetime is 25 to 65, which is 40 years, right, 40 years. So the first 10 years is 25 to 35, and that's the first quarter of your life, all right? And generally, the first quarter of your life, you're just trying to figure out who you are. How many people really did not know who you are in the first quarter of your life, right? How many people still don't know today who you are? I really didn't know. Then 35 to 45 is the second quarter of your life, okay? And then you go into the halftime show, okay? Some people call that a midlife crisis. And what that means is a person goes, oh my goodness, I'm not getting promoted, I'm not climbing the corporate ladder, maybe I should go do something else, maybe I should go back to school and all this. How many people understand what I mean about the midlife crisis? And you really question whether you're successful or not, did they make the right decisions? A lot of people change careers at this time. So you go into the third quarter, and that's 45 to 55, and then you go to the fourth quarter, which is 55 to 65. And hopefully by age 65, in the old days, in the World War II generation, that's when you generally retired and you went to play golf for the rest of your life. The problem is, a lot of times today with the 401ks and pensions going broke with the Pension Benefit Guaranty Corporation and all this, that many people will not be able to retire at age 65, so they go into OT, overtime. And what overtime sounds like is, would you like me to supersize that, please? You want Cokes, you want French fries with it and all this, and that's what overtime looks like. And it's really quite interesting. I'm not sure in this rule, but if you're collecting Social Security and you have a second job, they don't let you make too much money because you have to stay on Social Security. I'm not sure on the rules of that thing. But you have to take Social Security or work at the fast food place. And then after a while, it's called out of time. And out of time is when your body can no longer stand up and go to work. Another way of saying it, my rich dad used to say it to me, he says, most people spend their health gaining wealth. And in the last 2 years of their life, they spend their wealth trying to gain back their health. And they've shown that most people let go of their entire fortune within the last 18 months of their life because they're struggling, they're paying medical bills and all that. Does that make sense, you guys here? That's really what it is. So the pregame show is some people win the game of life in the pregame show, like Paris Hilton, that beautiful, intelligent young woman. She's very talented. She was born, I think, with $300 million in cash. So just by being born, the pregame show, she was out of the rat race and she was fine. And then for Kim, my wife, she won the game in the first quarter of her life. She was 37 years old. She exited. She had more than enough passive income, which is what this game teaches people here, is how to get out of the rat race and onto the fast track of life, and you're free to do what you want. So Kim won the game out of the rat race in the first quarter. And it took me till the second quarter. I was about 47 as I started to exit the rat race, and I was financially free. So when people ask me, what does money buy you? Well, some people, money buys problems. And for me, money bought me freedom. It bought Kim freedom. So if you work till 65, it bought Kim approximately 30 years of freedom, and it bought me approximately 20 years of freedom. So that's why I think it's important that financial education is important, except our school system still wants you to work till you're 65 and then go into overtime. That doesn't make any sense to me. So then that's some of the differences. And unfortunately, many people, the baby boom generation, I'm now in the fourth quarter, but all I'm doing is playing the same game I played most of my life. And I just get richer and richer and richer. And unfortunately, the baby boomers are now hitting into the fourth quarter. And the problem with the baby boom generation, and why I'm saying there's going to be a huge change, goes back to this diagram right here, what I started with, is that up to the year 2000, the population looked like this. You had a few rich, a few poor, and a lot of middle class. But now that the baby boom generation is starting to migrate and change, by the year 2020, that's why I say I think the diagram is going to look more like lots of poor people here. And what's going to cause that shift are 75 million baby boomers retiring. So if you look at the stats here, it's just simple math. If you look on this chart here, look at there's approximately 75 million baby boomers, and let's say each one is now going to collect $1,000 a month from Social Security and Medicare. That comes out to $75 billion a month. That's a lot of money. The Iraq War is costing us $4 billion right now. So what we have as an IOU is $75 billion. Now, most people say, well, what does a billion mean? It means basically we can't pay for it, or those born after 1964 are going to pay for it. But when you look at another stat up on that chart there, how much is a billion and a trillion? If you start counting at $1 per second, okay, how long does it take you to count $1 million? Will take you 12 days at $1 a second. So 12 days, you could be a millionaire. It's not that bad. But $1 billion takes 32 years. That's the jump. And this is the best part. $1 trillion takes 32,000 years. And so what's happened is the federal government is running up this bill at such a high rate of speed just because of 1971, like I said, they're allowed to print funny money. That's why I said the biggest change is funny money, and the world will be willing to accept it. So when you look at this, what is the price of Social Security and Medicare? As my Japanese friends say, Social Security. I said, that's what it is. It is so, you know. Because as the change goes into effect, this is the IOU starting back in 1935. 1935, Social Security came in. We owe $10 trillion. Now it takes 32,000 years to count $1 trillion. In 1964, Medicare, around there, 64 came in. Medicare is $64 trillion. And President Bush just passed the Prescription Drug Act and all that to get reelected. So the total price is $74 trillion. That is more money than all the stock markets and all the bond markets throughout the world. That is how big a promise they've made as campaign pledges. So if you study empires, which I study, the reason that the United States is going to go down, why the Roman Empire went down, is very simply because our politicians were able to make promises they never had to keep. Like when FDR made the promise of Social Security, there's a recorded transcript of him actually saying, he says, I'm only doing this to get reelected. He was reelected 4 times. And the reason LBJ brought in Medicare was to get, hopefully, because the war in Vietnam was so unpopular, he was hoping to get popular. So what brings down every great republic is very simply because politicians are allowed to make promises they're not going to keep ever. And we're right at this juncture right now, which is why I say we're about to have one of the biggest migrations possible. And the reason I created this product here, Teach to Be Rich, is, as I said, you know, the rich are going to get richer. And this is the middle class. And the middle class will pay for these people here. I don't expect Teach to Be Rich to solve the problem, but it may help some of your friends and families go this way rather than go this way. Because if you're going to try and work hard, that 96 Telecom Reform Act is going to stop that, because even today, if I'm a doctor and attorney, I can hire a doctor attorney in India. And I can hire a computer programmer for $12 an hour versus $200 an hour. Everything's changed. You know, if you're trying to save money, the federal government's going to print it faster than you can save it. You're not saving money, you're saving a currency anyway. So that's why I created this product here, the cash flow games, and may you teach your friends and family. There's no guarantees, but maybe some of them will not be part of the casualty that'll go this way. Now, I'm not saying I'm absolutely certain this happened, but that's what it looks like is going to happen. Does that make sense, you guys here? And that's my concern, and that's why I create this product over here, because that's how severe the situation is. Worst of all, the reason we get into a $74 trillion debt, again, goes back to my very first flip chart, is that people have no financial education. If you have no financial education, you cannot read a financial statement. And what happens then is this. This is the US government. We have 74 trillion. It's called an off-balance sheet accounting. They do not have to record this. That's why they say, well, it's only about $30 billion debt and all this. They do not have to report this. And as long as we're financially illiterate, we will not see this. The same companies that did this was Enron. Remember them? They had off-balance sheet accounting. That's against the law. The other company that did that was a little company called Arthur Andersen, an accounting firm. They had off-balance sheet accounting. The other person that does that is a US government. They do that. The difference is they can do it legally. So by having a financially illiterate nation, it only going to set up the greater possibility that will allow this to happen here. The reason I don't like stocks, bonds, and mutual funds, especially mutual funds, is they don't ever give you a financial statement. The reason mutual funds are for people who are financially illiterate, that they don't have to report the expenses inside of here. The same thing as the federal government will tell you that there's no inflation and there's no debt. It's just absolutely ridiculous. So I'll say it once again, the reason we got into this problem is the same reason the federal government, the Roman government went down, the Roman Empire. Same reason ours is in trouble today is because we have a financially illiterate populace, and the politicians can make promises that they never have to keep. And this is not just a problem of the poor, from presidents on down. There's so many people that are part of this problem. Teach to be Rich wants to be part of the solution, not part of the problem. Does that make sense, you guys here? So when we come back, we'll go into one last solution. But this is why I created this product, Teach to be Rich, is because maybe you can help yourself and your friends get out of this mess. Thank you very much.
Investor, educator, and author Robert Kiyosaki has changed millions of lives all over the world. His book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, has been on the New York Times bestseller list for over 5 years. We all know that the gap between the haves and the have-nots is growing, and Social Security and Medicare are in a financial mess. And just affording to live is getting expensive. So how does a person get ahead financially? The answer is raising your financial IQ and having your money work for you. Here's Robert Kiyosaki with Rich Dad's Teach to be Rich.
So the reason I created Teach to be Rich and this cash flow game, the real purpose was to teach people how to understand the fundamentals of accounting. Like when people say, what was Rich Dad, Poor Dad about? It's fundamentally a book on accounting, because you have to be able to read these things. Otherwise, you're completely suckered in all the time by such things as off-balance sheet accounting like this. This is illegal. If you and I did this, we would go to jail here. So this is what the world's greatest investor, Warren Buffett, says about the importance of understanding accounting or financial statements is this. He says, when managers want to get across the facts of the business to you, it can be done within the rules of accounting. Unfortunately, when they want to play games, at least in some industries, it can also be done within the rules of accounting. So they're playing games right here, and people cannot see the difference. If you can't recognize the differences, you shouldn't be in equity or stocks or real estate or anything for that matter if you can't read financial statements in equity picking business. In other words, if you're going to be an active investor, you have to understand this here. And that's why we created the cash flow game and all of these products. But there's another reason I use games, and I thought I'd best bring up my A student partner, Sharon, to explain why games are such important teaching tools. So Sharon, would you please come up here? May I have a hand for her, please?
Thank you, Robert. I have just a short story to tell you. The book, Teach to be Rich, Robert had handed me the first edited version, or the first version, for me to start working on. And literally the next day, I had a meeting at ASU, and they were looking at the game, doing a research project for us on the cash flow game.
You better say who ASU is, because this is going national.
Yes. ASU is Arizona State University, and they're right here in Tempe, Arizona. But they are literally doing a research project on our behalf on the importance of games and the effectiveness specifically of the cash flow game. So we're very excited, because even though we're not trying to work through the educational system, it's starting to turn around and come to us, and I'm very happy about that. But the very next day after Teach to be Rich was done, and it was in my hands, I'm listening to these educators inside the system, and they hand me this document called The Cone of Learning. Now, you can't read everything, but I just want to point out the source. Dale, 1969. Now, this information was developed and released to the educational marketplace in 1969. What's important about this is how you learn, the effectiveness of learning. At the bottom is reading.
I'll just draw it in bigger diagrams here. What the cone of learning said was that the worst way to learn is via reading. And what our school system says are smart people are people who can read. And I'm not a very good reader, and that's why I had a very, 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 very tough time in school. The second way, they say, is the worst way of learning. And these are teachers. This guy Dale in 1969, they've known this for years. The second way, the worst way of learning, is via lecture. How many people in school were ever really bored doing a lecture? How many people sometimes felt it was a waste of time? Good. But yet that's what our teachers are designed to do. They want you to read and they lecture. And that's why so many young people drop out of school today, because they can't stand it anymore. So go on to, so we can move up and then.
I was at a convention last year of secondary school principals, administrators, and I had a man come up to the table to our booth, and he was livid. He was a principal of school. He says, "This is what's wrong with our school system. We're playing games. We should be teaching them reading and writing and arithmetic." And I'm going, please play it. The same guy now has ordered games for his district. So again, reading and writing is at the bottom, and that's still what we're doing in our school system. At the very top, doing the real thing, taking action, doing the real thing in life. And what's right below it? Simulating the real thing. Playing the game, playing cash flow. When I saw this, I stopped the meeting we were having at Arizona State University, called Robert, and said, "Robert, you will not believe what I've just seen. This is going to be the beginning, the middle, and the end of Teach to Be Rich, because it validates his life of teaching."
As I said, games, I mean, I saw a completely different world playing Monopoly. You know, by just playing Monopoly, suddenly I saw the way that I could become rich. And it had nothing to do with school and all this. It's not to say that reading and lecture are not important, but it's to say this is the way we learn the most. You know, I've learned by playing games. And then right before that is real life. So that's why we recommend you play the cash flow game 3 or 4 times and teach it to 10 people before you start playing with real life money. The last thing I want to say about real life is this. One of the reasons A, students are not successful in the real world, not all of them, but a lot of them aren't, is because what they learn in school down here is not to make mistakes. So they're really afraid of the real world, and they stay in the corporate world, the world of academia. How many people know people who went to school at age 5 and they're still in school today? You know, that was my poor dad. He only did well in school, so he stayed there. He had no idea what the real world was about because he was afraid of making mistakes. So that's how it affects the whole thing. So when you get this book here, you can study this cone of learning right now, but you can see the worst ways of learning are reading and lecture, and the best ways of playing games and by doing the real thing. And that's why we created the cash flow game, was to not only for you to learn, but to help other people learn. Because when you play a game, it's mental, emotional, physical, as well as spiritual learning. Because it involves all of your senses. So
it's also why this product, Teach to Be Rich, is going to be a larger book. It's going to include the DVDs that we are recording with you today. It's because we want to walk the talk. It's experiential learning. And experiential learning is simulating the real thing and then doing it and learning from your mistakes.
Yeah. I'd like to bring one of my best friends, Blair Singer, because you have a son who's like me in school, right?
Yeah, Ben.
Yeah. Why don't you tell him what's happened to him?
Well, Ben is one of these 10-year-old boys in school that have a hard time sitting still. Has anybody here ever met one? And as a result of that, he's had difficulty in some of the traditional reading, writing, and math stuff at school. As a result, we've had him play, we played cash flow game with him, the kids version, but he got a little bored with that and decided that he wanted to play the adult version. And I have to tell you right now that my son, Ben, has probably played the cash flow adult version of the game at least 20 or 25 times. He typically gets out of the rat race in about 20 minutes.
Most adults takes 4 hours, if ever.
It takes 4 hours. But what's interesting about it is here was a kid who had a hard time with reading, special programs, the teachers
Math.
had concern, problems with math, all of this stuff. But what he learned in the cash flow game is he now, when doing the financial statements, we actually took the financial statement to his reading coach. And they said, who wrote this out for him? They go, he did it. Because he's doing it, his writing is legible, his math is perfect. He went from, actually, I didn't tell you this, he actually went from doing, he's in 5th grade, went from doing 4th grade level math, he's not doing 7th grade level math because it has relevance to him now. And it's true. But the biggest win, here's a kid who really had, as all 10-year-olds, really, their view of themselves is very, very important. And sometimes when he gets a little beat up on the soccer field or a little bit beat up by the kids that are supposedly smarter, he comes back and he wants to play the cash flow game. Because out of the cash flow game, in listening to us talk, he takes his allowance money and he goes out and he buys silver.
He saves silver, not currency.
Not currency. And so what happens is he comes back and because his friends did something to him, and he goes, but they don't have silver. So, some people say that, about money and self-esteem and all that stuff, but what we observe, my wife Eileen and I observe with our son, is his ability to really manifest something through this game in the real world has done light years for his self-esteem. In a world where he's been persecuted because he wasn't smart enough, not attentive enough, too good of a salesperson, so he's considered disruptive in school if you're a good salesperson, is that he found a place where, as you talk about, that he has financial genius. And in working with his class, and we do a couple events there, he actually stood in front of the room in front of 50 4th, 5th, and 6th graders and explained to them the purpose of knowing your math, because if you bought silver at $7.25 and now it's $8.50, how much money did I make? He says in front of the room.
Right.
So that's a testimony to games in a world where reading and lecture has always been prized. Is you got to handle that first. And in the case of Ben, the game comes first.
Right. So thank you. That's what So again, that's why I created this product. But I'd like to end with this thought. And my thought is this, that every single one of us has a genius, okay? And as I said earlier, it was only until I went to school that I think I was stupid. I didn't know I was stupid until I went to school and the teacher started labeling me that. And I started looking at that, I said, this is really quite, ridiculous. And it was my rich dad again who really kind of helped me with it and all this. He says, there's people with different kinds of geniuses, but we all have one. Let me say it this way. Every animal has a special advantage. For instance, a cheetah can run fast, a bird can fly, and a cockroach you cannot kill. Everything, every one of God's creatures has a special genius, something unique that's for them. So if a cockroach has one, why not you? That's the way I look at it. So my poor dad, who was a school teacher, also said to me, my poor dad didn't like school either. He was trying to protect their genius. He said, what the word genius comes from is genie in us. It's that magic. It's where we do something that's different than everybody else. And I want to say this much, for me personally, my genius, if I could say this, my genius did not come out in school. It was crushed in school. I do not do well with reading and lecture. Also, my genius does not come out in the corporate world. I do not like climbing the corporate ladder. I don't like to say hello, yes sir, no sir, I'll do as you tell me, sir. I don't like what they pay me. I don't like their benefit plans. So my genius didn't do well in the corporate world. Some people do. The definition of intelligence is for you to be smart enough or intelligent enough to find that spot in the world where your genius comes out. And let me explain that. Your genius is dependent upon the environment you're in. As I said, my genius didn't do well in school and didn't do well in the corporate world. My genius does well on the street. My genius does well in real estate. I do well as an entrepreneur, but not as a corporate guy. I don't get along with them too well. I'm a different kind of character. Does that make sense to you? So if you can understand this, Tiger Woods has a genius. But Tiger Woods' genius comes out in the environment of the golf course. You ever watch that guy pick up the club? That's where his genius comes out. If he was a jockey, he would not be a genius there. So you have to find the environment where your genius comes out, because every one of us has one. Mick Jagger went to school to be an accountant, but he found his genius as a what? Rolling Stone. And so the message I want to leave with each and every one of you is that you have a genius. If you look at this picture up here on the plasma, see, every child has one. It's that magic. It's that thing that they know that nobody else knows. It's that special gift that every child is born with. And the problem with school is it crushes the genius of kids who do not respond well to reading and lecture. So if you look at it this way, this here is what your environment looks like. You know, like I said, I didn't do well in school. I didn't do well in the corporate world, but I do well on the streets. I do well in real estate. I don't do well in picking stocks. I don't do well with bonds. I don't do well with mutual funds. That's not where my genius lies. So your job, ladies and gentlemen, is have the courage and the wherewithal to go out and find that spot in the world when you rub the magic lamp, your environment, your genius comes out. Where that is, I don't know, but may you have the courage to find it. If you do as our school system teaches you, which is to go to school and look for a safe, secure what? Job, work hard, save money, get out of debt, diversify, and invest for the long term, you'll probably never find your genius. Does that make sense, you guys here? So may you find your genius, because each and every one of you has it. It is only crushed when you don't have the courage to find it. It doesn't mean your genius is easy to find. Look at Tiger Woods. He busts his you-know-what to find his genius. Look at Oprah Winfrey. You know, she's been in front of television, and she works really hard to be successful at that. Too many people think that just because it's your genius, it should be easy. Lazy people really don't get ahead. I have no respect for lazy people because I'm one of the laziest people I know. I never thought that my genius would lie in education because I hated school so much. But the moment I started to teach outside the system, I noticed that people's lives were changing. But not just that, I'm not saying I'm the best teacher, but I make more money than most teachers. And so the world will reward you if you have the courage to give your gift, your genius. Does that make sense, you guys here? It's very, very important. So in closing, if I could say this, that I'm not saying do real estate. And I'm not saying do what do you call that, entrepreneurship. But some of you may find your genius as an employee. Some of you may find it as a self-employed person. Mine just happened to be over here. Because a guy named Jim Cramer on CNBC, his genius is picking stocks. That guy is a genius at that. He shouldn't do real estate. Buffett says, why should I do real estate when stocks are so easy? So the point here, ladies and gentlemen, just don't follow blindly like a pack of sheep. Invest for the long term, diversify, save money, get out of debt, and turn your money over to so-called experts. You have a genius, so does your children, so the people around you. The reason I want you to play the cash flow game and study is so that you can find your genius. But like I said, it takes some work for it to come out, because you have a gift. The most important thing is find out what really works for you, not what I say. Does that make sense, you guys here? So rub that magic lamp, that environment. It could be in church. It could be as a poet. It could be as a gardener. Who cares? It's where your genius comes out. And when you find that, I think you'll find your life more abundant and happier. There's nothing worse than somebody who's working because their parents told them to do it, or because you make a lot of money at it. That's when people go postal. You know, they have a job security with the post office department, and they really cannot stand it because they've bought somebody else's program here. So, as I said, I'm not pushing stocks, bonds, real estate, entrepreneurship, and all this, but really my whole message is to find that genius. Because as Warren Buffett, the world's greatest investor, says, it's a very important quote. Happily, there's more than one way to get to financial heaven. And ladies and gentlemen, may you find that way that works best for you. Thank you very much.